Welcome back, everybody. We're now going to move on in Module 4 to lab number 3. The topic here is editing an object in a list, right? So in the previous lab, we were able to take complicated objects with their properties and their methods, store them in a list, and then basically get them out on the screen by traversing them through a loop. In this case, we're going to try to edit one of the objects inside the list, right? So we have to be able to find the right object in the list, referring to it with index values, and then tweaking its contents, and then making sure that it worked. And that's kind of the grand goal. Now, there's a new thing that we're going to look at here. Now, we kind of have talked about this topic already, so this is a little bit of reiteration, if you will, playing on a loop definition. But let's go quickly over to W3 schools and just kind of refresh our memory. So if you have a really simple list, and here's a simple list, if you guys remember this one, apple, banana, and cherry. So the 3 pieces of fruit are in a list as strings. And then if I want to access any one of the particular elements inside of that list, I simply use its index value. So which one of these items would this return? Yeah, banana is correct, right? Because the first one is in position 0. The second one is in position 1. And the third one is in position 2. The list has a length of 3, but the highest index value is 2 because why? Computers start counting at 0. So this is really kind of an important, reinforcement. We can also use this negative indexing. So this would refer to the last item in the list, and where this comes from, of course, is when we look at, what is the length -1 to get the last index position. So Python shortcutted the whole thing and just used the -1 to refer to the last position. Very clever, once again. And I love that abbreviated syntax because it's better than going length parentheses -1, right? It just shortcuts the whole thing. You can also declare a range of indexes. I don't think that's something that we've done before, but here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right, items. So the length is 7. The index values go from 0 to 6. And we just want to print those in the range of index position 2 to 5. So which ones will it print? Well, this is 0, that's 1. So it's going to print 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's going to print those items. Once again, nice, clever syntax, very, very efficient syntax, right? Love it. It's really cool. All right. Here's another weird one. This one is returns the items from the beginning to, but not including kiwi. Why? Because look at the syntax. We use a colon for, so it's saying just all of them except for number 4. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3. So kiwi is in position 4. So it's returning everything but that one. Kind of cool examples. This is another weird syntax. We put the colon after the number, and it returns all the items from cherry to the end, remembering that cherry is in position 2. So it'll return all of these. Really clever syntaxes that they've thrown into Python, by the way. More, right? So if you want to kind of like go down this rabbit hole, we also have the range of what we call negative indexes. And read what it says. It says specify negative indexes if you want to start the search from the end of the list and move the other direction. So in other words, it's still a range, but we're starting from 4 to 1, moving backwards. The negative signs are both in place. So we're going to start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Is that correct? And go all the way down, but not including mango. So we're going to go from orange down to banana. Let's try that one. Is this what you expected as an output? Right, not at all, right? So negative indexing means it's starting from the end of the list. This example returns the items from index -4 included to index -1 excluded. So range command excludes the last one. So we're getting melon, kiwi, and orange. So this is a kind of a weird one, maybe a little bit of a mind bender. Maybe I should not have presented this one. All right, let's jump into this. We have enough information to be dangerous now. So let's do lab number 3 and read the instructions. And it says create a class called grocery item. Include the following properties: name, category, and quantity. Pre-populate a list of grocery items, right? So we'll do that. And then create a menu. All right, let's do the first parts first because the menu is going to be kind of a separate thing. All right, let's first create the class. Back over to Visual Studio Code, we're going to create a new file. So this is going to be module 4 lab3.py. And I'm going to leave a little space at the top because we are going to do an import of our helper function here. In fact, you know what? Let's just go ahead and type the import in. So I'm going to say from the helper file. Now, I don't have to say .py here, but because it's in the same folder, I just call its name. So I'm going to say from helper, import the method or function, whichever way you want to think of it, get int, which is going to capture an integer for us. So now I don't have to write all that code I did with the loop and the try except. I just call it in. It's just going to work. So that's important. Then we're going to start with the class definition, and we're going to call it grocery item, capital G, capital I, and a colon. We're going to create our init function, so double underscore init. And get rid of the little lambda here. Now, technically, that's a return statement, by the way, but we're not going to utilize it that way. We'll set up the 3 properties we were asked to set in there. And, you know, what I'm realizing is I forgot to define them here. So we wanted name, category, and quantity. So we'll apply all of those. We'll set name to name, self dot category to category. Oops. Self firing on all cylinders there, aren't I? Self dot quantity to quantity, and I see a typo. You guys see it? And it's not an equal sign. That is a negative for a dash. All right, so now it's all fixed. So there's our 3 properties defined inside the init function, the constructor, as we call it. We're also going to build a string or str function here. So I'm going to do def double underscore str. I'm going to get rid of the defaults that dropped in here. What are we passing into that? Well, we don't need to pass anything into it. It's going to just take the object as it exists, and it's simply going to return in the form of an F string first its name, we'll do a space dash space, then it's going to return the category. Let the IntelliSense guide you. I don't know if you guys are catching how I'm doing that. I'm just, typing self dot. What's the last one I have to do? Quantity. I'm just going to type Q. It's already highlighted, and then I just press enter and it drops it in. If you're not used to working with an ID, if you're kind of new to coding, that's the thing you kind of get used to. I will tell you that all IDEs that have what we call IntelliSense like this, which are basically reading the other structures on the screen, and then allowing you to basically feed them in automatically, you might initially have a resistance to accepting the input. But what I'm going to tell you is experienced programmers find out very quickly that this is a way to eliminate making mistakes. So go with it. You know, let it guide you. Use the force, Luke. The force is the intelligence. Hey, I mean, it's kind of like if you have like a car that's got lane correction or automatic braking, why not use it, right? It might save your life, right? It's and in coding, it really, what ends up happening is you code more quickly and more correctly, right? Which means your productivity goes up, which means you get paid more for doing less work. Well, not exactly. You still have to do the work. It still has to be correct, right? All right. The next thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to create a list of grocery items. So I'm going to create a variable called items, which will hold a list. We'll put in the equal sign and a pair of square brackets. I'm going to split the square brackets like this. And notice when I pressed enter in between them, it automatically kind of put them in position. And now I'm going to instantiate, another word for create, several grocery items. Now I'm going to do this with a copy paste, frankly, because I am lazy and want to save time. And because I am sometimes kind, here it is in the chat, so you can do the same. Now you will notice that the one thing I did here is at the end of each line, I included a comment to show the index position of each one of those items, just for reference. Not that you couldn't figure it out, but why not, right? It's helpful, and as you're learning, I think this is good. Now you could change any of this stuff that you want. That's up to you. Right? So you want to use different names, different categories, different quantities, feel free. Now, we have some other directives. So let's go and read the directives. Let's see if we accomplish this. It says create a class called grocery item, include the properties. Okay, we right, and we added a string method too, which it didn't tell us to do yet, but we're going to do that. Then we're going to pre-populate a list of grocery items. Check and check. We got both of those bullets down. Now we're going to create a menu that with the following options and functionality. So maybe menu choice one would be list the items, lists all the groceries. The second option would be to update a quantity, which lists all the groceries, gets the grocery item from the user, updates the quantity property of that item, and stores it back in the list. Right, so that's a little more complicated. And an option to exit the program. Okay, so let's kind of build this one step at a time here. To me, it makes sense to build the user interface first. Now, we kind of learned this in some of the previous labs from the previous modules, that an interface like that sits really well inside of a while loop, right? And once again, we'll force the while loop to just run, and then we'll worry about the listing the items and updating the items as separate actions. Okay, so let's go back to Visual Studio Code, and let's go ahead and kind of build our little system. I'm going to put it all inside of a while loop. I'm going to force the loop to run, and then we'll exit the loop by people making basically the option to exit. They're not choosing something from the menu. All right, so let's do one concise print statement that displays the whole menu all at once. So one statement to do all the work. So you might have done this in separate statements in the past, but we're just going to do a new line. We're going to list items, update an item, or exit. 1, 2, or 3 are the choices. Do I really need the F string thing here? No, not really, but I already typed it in, so I'm not going to untype it. Now we're going to grab the user's choice. So the user's going to type something on the screen now, and we're going to grab it. But instead of us writing a bunch of code here to handle that, now we're going to use this import. So we're going to go here and use this method, which is going to grab the value from the prompt. And the prompt is going to be typed here by us, right? We're just going to have a little thing that says selection or choice or something like that. It'll end up here, convert it to an integer. And if it's an integer, convertible to an integer, we'll just return it back and we're out. If not, we get the error message and they get prompted again. So in other words, I don't have to add all this code here, right? So you can see how this is going to be a whole lot more efficient. Instead, I'm going to just call get int. And I want you to notice that even as I was typing it, it recognizes that it's available. Where is it available from? From the import. So the import goes to the helper file. We're grabbing that method. So we're using stuff from a different program to augment the program that we have. So pretty cool, right? I think. You might not think it's cool, but here, I think it's cool. Now we're also going to go to a new line, and then let's just make it really, really clean and simple, and say selection. And in fact, maybe, instead of just doing a new line, maybe let's just tab it in. I think that's how the screen is that they have. All right, so it's just going to say selection. That's the prompt. Whatever is grabbed from there, it's going to go to that other method in that external file, see if it's valid. If it is, it brings the value back and stores it here. If it's not, it keeps prompting until they get it right. I think that's pretty neat. All right. Now we can process the choices. So let's do that with an if statement. We'll say if the choice equals, right, is equivalent to, in other words, to 1. What are we going to do? Well, 1 is to list the items. So we'll create a function called list item, right? We have not created this yet. That's why it's underlining, but we will create it. Else if the choice is equivalent to 2, what are we going to do? We're going to update the item. So let's create a function called update. Not yet created, but we're about to. And then what's the other option? Well, we'll just come up with an else. So if they don't type 1 or 2, maybe they'll type 3, but anything else they type will basically break us out of the loop and end the program. We'll just do a break. We could handle it a different way, but I think that's pretty good. So now we need to create these 2 functions. All right, so I'm going to talk about this other concept, which is kind of interesting. And I do this a little bit because these are important programming concepts. And when you move on, like if you guys are in the data analytics or data program, or I guess the new AI program, or if you're moving into anything that's like database related or programming that interfaces with stored data items, this phrase comes into play, CRUD. And so maybe some of you have heard about this, right? So CRUD is an acronym that stands for this. I'm just pasting it in, but all right, so we either create information, we read the information, we update the information, or we delete the information. And some people will actually call that last one destroy. Kind of like, I don't know. But CRUD is that acronym because basically whenever we're taking information that is stored somehow, right? And a database is probably the most classic example. Those are the four actions you complete, right? You either create the data, you're reading the data, you're changing the data or updating it, or you're deleting it. It's one of those four actions. So we're going to basically draw upon two of these, right? So, all right. So which ones are we going to draw upon? Well, we're going to read the data and we're going to update the data. Those are the two that we're working on. Right. Now, if we wanted, and if we were writing a full application, we might also include the others, but those are the only two that we were told to do. So let's do the first one, which is to list the item. So we'll call it list item, parentheses. And if you want, you could say here, this is the R in CRUD. So how do we do this? Well, if I'm going to take an item and list it, and actually think about this, the menu option actually says list items, like all of them, right? So if I have to do multiple ones, what's a good structure for doing that? Well, it's repetitive, so it would be a loop, right? Now, since I would be looping through, I might want to keep track of it because I might want to, for example, say Ruffles, item one, or item one, Ruffles, item two, Yasso bar, whatever that is, item three, Chips Ahoy, right? And so I'm just going to create an I as a counter to kind of put those numbers in. I'm going to start it at 0. Now I'm going to do my loop. I'm going to say for each item in the items. Which are the items? Well, that list I have up there. And see the use of singular and plural here as well. Items refers to an object that already exists. Item is a local variable that we use inside this loop. Here comes my colon. And now we'll process it. And it's going to be a simple print statement, folks. F string it. What I'm going to say here is item. Watch this clever syntax. I'm going to take that I plus 1. So the first item will be 1 because it started at 0. And let's do a colon where it's going to list the item. And then I'll just string interpolate that. So we'll just do, so item 1, Ruffles. Then of course I want to increment my counter. And I could do it one of two ways. I could go I equals I plus 1. That's one option. Or what an experienced programmer typically would do is I plus 1, which is the same thing functionally. So you could do it either way. I like this approach better. Notice here we're adding 1, correct? But it doesn't stick. So that's why I have to do it afterwards to actually increment it. Could I change the order of that? Yeah, I could. Yeah, you can do it a bunch of different ways, but this will work. So this will loop through that structure, and what it'll grab is the name. So we'll say 1, Ruffles, 2, Yasso bar, 3, Chips Ahoy, whatever. All right, so I think you, all right, so that is the R in CRUD, the read. All right. Now we're going to define the next one, which is to, what was that one called? Update item. Parentheses again, and a colon. And let's think about how this would work, right? So if I want to update an item, well, I just listed them, right? So if I'm going to list the items, well, that's great. You're just showing me a list. Now, if I'm asking somebody to update an item, wouldn't it be helpful to get the items listed again? Like, which item do you want to update? Well, I'm not sure what item number was that. We're doing a short list and I can see what they are. But if you don't know what it is, you want to see it first. So I'll have this function call the other function. So I'll just have it list all the items. See the cleverness of that, right? So I don't have to redo that work. So we're reusing block of code that's already created. Then what we need to do is ask the user which item they want to update. So here's what I'm going to do. If I want to update item number 1, the problem is its index value is 0. Creates a little bit of a conundrum, right? So for a user, they want to count normal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Computer counts 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have to figure that out here. So I'm going to create a variable called index. So it picks the right index value. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call that get int thing again. So I'm going to prompt the user on this, and I'm going to say, and we'll tab that in. I think probably makes sense. Yeah, we'll say, what item would you like to update? In the spot where they can type it in, and whatever it is they type in, this will return a number, right? Because that's what get int will do. And if they don't do it right, it'll keep prompting them. But whatever number they type in, I need to subtract 1 from it to have the right index value. It's always going to be 1 less. That'll store an index. Now I can actually go in and do the updating. So, for example, here's my little comment that I'm going to interject here. So here's the syntax. So now I want to do an update, but I have to store it. So this is going to be kind of complicated in the sense that what is it that I want to change? Okay, well, I think that if I'm going to buy Ruffles, 3 bags are good, but 4 bags are better. Right, so maybe I just want to update the quantity. Right, so that's what we're going to be updating here. So the way I would do the syntax is I would say items with the index value that the user selected, which was mathematically adjusted. And then we're going to change the quantity property. Okay, so what's that going to be equal to? Well, we're going to prompt the user for that. We're going to say, hey, instead of 3, what do you want? 1, 5, none? Right, so this is going to be a prompt. So once again, I'm going to use that get in function with a prompt. And I'm going to just say something like, how many, now instead of saying something generic like how many of these do you want, I can reach in to the object itself and say item at that index position and call it by name. I can pull its name back and say, how many Ruffles do you want? So here is the do you want? I'm going to do a question mark. You can do a colon or whatever. So kind of see how that works. And oops, and I got syntax error here. That should be items. So this will prompt them, get a value. It'll associate it to the correct name. After they type it in, it'll make sure it's a valid thing, that the external function does that. And then it'll feed it back into the quantity property. Really powerful. Very simple at the same time as well. And then we will go ahead and then we will list the item, and actually the whole list again, and then you will see the update. Right? You can see those items back up on the screen. So it puts a list up, you select, says how many do you want, press enter, it gets stored, and the list pops up on the screen again. All right. All right. I'm not sure if you guys are all caught up in your coding, but this is ready to run, folks. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a run. I'll try to keep those functions on the screen as best I can, because these are the 2 that we just created. So you guys can keep copying if you need. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a Control S to save. and hitting the run button. And then I'm going to increase the console size just a little bit here. All right, so let's see if the listing works. Here comes one. All right, there we go. Item one, Ruffles. Junk food, you got three. Item two, Yasso bar, et cetera, but it looks like it's pulling back the data nicely. All right. Let's try doing an update. So which one do I want to update? Let's update the number 4 espresso. Sure need a whole lot more of that. So I'm going to say 4. Okay. Now I'm going to list the items again. Notice the listing already happened automatically. Notice how the number did update. Now I'm going to do this one more time. And now I'm going to type in, for example, 3 to exit, and it did. Let's run it again. And this time I want to list the items. It did it. I want to update an item. And there's items 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then what if I type 5? Okay, well, that broke horribly, didn't it? Why did it break horribly? So this is why we wrote the other function. So this is just a demonstration, by the way, that in the helper function, we didn't really make a determination here on a range. So we were just using the simple part here, but there's no range declared. So when it went back, it's not this that was throwing the error. It's actually our main program that's throwing the error because we don't have a number 5. And notice what the error says here, if you can read it. Index quantity get in, index error list out of range. So this doesn't come from the helper file. This comes from our file because I don't have a number 5. Okay. So this is kind of explaining why do we create one with a range? Because then we can set that range, send it in, and not have it do that. That'll be the next step in the next lab. All right. How did it go for everybody? Is it okay?
I couldn't get my helper table to import, I don't think.
Okay. All right, we're gonna move into the next lab assignment, but just in case you need a complete screenshot of the code here, here's the top part. Up through line 32. And the remainder. All right, just remember the video will be out tomorrow, so you guys can have this copy from there. All right, jumping back over to the browser here, and I'm going to move on to the next lab. All right, we're going to throw in one little additional piece of information here, by the way. So I'm going to shuffle us off over to W3 schools, and we're going to talk about the POP method. And I think we've talked about this real briefly relative to lists, but let's just go look at the definition here. When we're working with a list and we want to remove one of the items, we can use the POP method, and we can specify the index position. So if I try this particular piece of code here, you'll notice that we have apple, banana, cherry, which is position 0, 1, and 2. And if I pop position 1, it removes banana, leaving us only with apple and cherry. So that position is now removed from the list, and now cherry is in position 1, right? So that's one way to remove stuff from a list, and a very popular way to do it. So pop removes something at a specific index value in a list. Now, there's more to that command, but that's all the information that we need to kind of do our work here. So let's look at the instructions for the lab and see what we can do here. It says create a class called vehicle, include 3 properties, make, model, and year, and then pre-populate a list of vehicles. All right, so let's do those two tasks. This is kind of similar to the pattern that we've been following. Let's begin by creating a new file. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file called module 4 lab4.py. We're still going to use our helper function. So I'm going to say from helper import get int. And we're going to start with that, by the way. And then, by the way, if you want, you could ramp it up and kind of use the other method in there. But for right now, we're just going to say get int. All right. When we get to the assignment, we'll import both of the methods, right? So we'll get to that. But for right now, we're just going to still keep using this one. We're going to build our class definition first. So I'm going to type class. I'm going to call it vehicle. And we're going to define an init function. Inside the parentheses, along with self-referring, we're going to add properties for make, model, and we're going to remove pass from here. And we're just going to follow the routine that we've been doing. So we're going to say self make equals make, self model equals model, self year equals year. We're also going to put the string method in there to help us do output. We're just going to use the self-referring because we're just going to be extracting stuff from the object itself. And we're going to do a simple return of a string, including the F component in there. And we're just going to do kind of similar to what we did with the grocery stuff. We'll do self.year, because you think of how like vehicles are described. You'll say like a 1999, Ford Escort or something like that. So we'll do self.year. And then let's make it kind of look nice. We'll put a pipe in there, but you can do a comma or a dash if you wish. And then we'll say self.make. Oops. And then space and self.model. So it's just, in other words, it's just going to put back up on the screen the information. Right. Those are the only two methods that we're going to have in there. So we'll be able to create it and then look at it. Come out of the class definition here. And then we're going to pre-populate a list of vehicles. I do happen to have one handy. I am dropping it in the chat for everybody to save you the effort of typing it. So here's the one that I'm using. So we have a Honda Accord 2005, a Ford F-150 from 2018, and a Cadillac CTS from 2014. And if you want, you can add other vehicles, whatever you choose to do. Let's go back and look at the instructions. So I think we covered the first two bullets once again. And then we're going to go back to this process of creating a menu. So we're going to follow the same approach we used before. We'll create the menu, grab the choice using the get int method, process the choices, calling functions, and then we'll build the functions to go with. So let's go back. And what I'm hoping that you're picking up on here is kind of like a flow of process. This is a common way to proceed. I am going to come up with 3 print statements here to basically put menu choices on the screen. You could do this all in one line if you wish, up to you. So I'm going to say add a vehicle. Do choice number 2. Quotations there though. We'll do remove a vehicle. And then our third choice will be to exit. So this time we put them all on separate lines. We'll follow the same approach as before. We're going to say choice equals, we're going to call that get in thing. We'll, I don't think we need to F string this, but let's make it tab in, and we'll say selection. And last time I didn't leave a space after it, so I'm going to make sure I put a space after it this time. Then we're going to process the choices, same kind of technique. So if the choice equals 1, we'll create one called add vehicle. Spelled correctly, of course. With parentheses. Else if the choice is equivalent to 2, we will remove the vehicle. And finally, if it's something else, we are out. So now we need to create these two functions. So I'm going to come up here and define them. So let's start with add a vehicle. Now, if you go back to that whole concept of CRUD, adding a vehicle would be to create, right? So that would be to create one of the objects. So let's define it and say add vehicle. So first, let's start by listing the vehicles. Well, you know what? We didn't create that yet, did we? All right, so I'm using the one method to call another, or one function to call another. So here, so we're going down this process here. Right. So I'm thinking, hey, wouldn't it be helpful to list them like we did with the groceries? Sure, it would. So why don't we go ahead and create that one right away? And so that's of course is another one of those CRUD operations. So we'll define it. We'll say list vehicle. And actually, you know, let's use the plural here because in my mind that makes more sense. Maybe it does in yours too. This will be a mechanical process. We don't have to send anything to it. And let's think about this here. Do we want some sort of an introduction to this? Probably. Let's do a print statement. Let's F string it. And let's say there are, well, this time I'm going to call a function, which is going to count the number of vehicles. So I'm going to put that inside here. Close the parentheses. See how it wanted to put it outside. So that's going to take that return result of that function. There are X vehicles. Then kind of like we did before, we'll set up a little counter variable. We'll run a for loop, and this time we'll just kind of abbreviate it and say for V in vehicles, we'll do the following. First, we're going to do the I+1 ahead of time this time. So we're going to do a plus equals 1. So we'll increment the counter first, so I don't have to do it in the statement. Catch my drift. And then we'll just do a simple print command, F string, and we'll say the current count, a colon, followed by whichever vehicle it is, right? So if it makes more sense for you to say for vehicle in vehicles, you can do that. I'm just going to use the V, but you see how simple the syntax becomes then, and why it's better to maybe increment this before rather than after. little bit cleaner syntax. So this is just the listing. All right, so that takes care of this issue. All right, so let's go ahead now that we've listed them, and let's go ahead and we're doing an add a vehicle here, and I'm just thinking, if we're adding a vehicle, hold on a second. Do I need to be listing them right now? No, in fact, maybe where I should start is maybe I should start with removing a vehicle. So sorry, just not following my pattern here. So you guys can change that too. So let's start with remove, which is going to list the vehicles. And then we're going to go in there. Once again, we'll get the index value like we did last time. So we'll do a get int. We will prompt, and we will say, which space. Of course, whatever it returns, we need to subtract one to get the right index value again. Same thing we did before. Then we're very simply going to take that vehicle list. We're going to run the pop command on the index value, and that vehicle is deleted. If you're keeping track, this is D input or delete. Once we're done doing the deleting, let's relist the vehicles to make sure that it actually happened so we can see the vehicle disappear. Now let's write the function for adding a vehicle. Parentheses and a colon. All right. If we're going to add a vehicle, think about this. Now we need to capture all the information to build the object. So that includes the make, the model, and the year. And rather than do like a bunch of, combination statements, I'm going to separate all these out. So I'm just going to say make equals the input, and we'll prompt, and we'll say enter make. And you can probably figure out the rest of this at this point. So we're going to do the same with model. And we'll say input, enter a model. And then, of course, we're going to do year. And we'll say input. And then, do we need to make this an integer? I'm going to argue yes, right? Because I'm looking at the list we have up there, and they're coming in as integers. Could you store it as a string? Think about that. Yeah, you totally could. Right. There's some advantages to making a number though. So we can use the get int to do that. And then all I have to send to get int is the prompt itself, which is enter a year. And then that will handle the numeric conversion for us and capture and return the number to store. All right. Then now that we have those three pieces of information, we can now call upon the vehicles list, and then we can append. What are we going to append? All right, well, it's going to go inside these parentheses. What we're going to append is we're going to call upon the constructor with the three pieces of information, reach into the class, create the object, and then append it to the vehicle list. So all in one step. So here comes the vehicle class with parentheses. Inside there, we will send the make, the model, and the and then after we create it, we're going to go ahead and list the vehicles again. It's a parentheses so it can execute. And I know I'm typing this in pretty quickly, but the code is done. That's all of it, folks. Not too bad, really. And let's just kind of review this really quick from top to bottom. So we're doing our import. We have the class definition, stores the data properties, returns a string, so we can create that list. We have a pre-configured list of vehicles. You could add more to it if you wish, right? Well, actually, we'll have the capability through the program to do that, won't we? We have a function to list the vehicles, which loops through the list. We have a function to remove a vehicle. Well, if this is the D in CRUD, then add vehicle, this is the C in CRUD, which is the create. Now, really, the previous one, what were we doing? We were just reading and updating. In this one, we're creating and destroying, or creating and deleting. So we add a vehicle, remove a vehicle, exit. We have a selection. We respond to the selection. And I see I got an error here. Good thing I looked. Right, so it's a good thing to review your code before you try to run it, because I forgot to put the parentheses after that, which would not have allowed the function to work, by the way. I'll leave it there for just a second. Right. I am going to do a Control S to save. And then I'm going to give it a run, see what happens. All right. And we'll make the console a little bit bigger so we can see it. Okay. Well, let's start by adding a vehicle. So here I'm going to type add. Okay. 1 to add, enter a make. All right. Let's throw in now you can see it lists back up on the screen. Now, what you guys should be saying in your heads, right? It's like, well, hey, we had like list and update before. Couldn't we just put those in too? Well, yeah, totally, right? You could totally have those as menu options, but I really wanted to show you the other two options is really what it is. So there are 4 vehicles now, and you can see that I've added one of them. Let's go ahead and add one more. Okay, you can see that one's added as well. Now let's try option number 2. Which would you like to remove? Now we're just going to type a number here. And I think I'm going to remove the Cadillac. Okay. And now it's gone. Try it again. Let's choose number 2 to remove a vehicle. Which one are we going to remove this time? Let's remove the Honda, which is 1. And you can see that one's gone. So now we have the capability to add and remove items. Before we were just listing and updating. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out where we're going next, right? I mean, on the assignment, wouldn't it be kind of nice to do all of those functions at once so you get all the CRUD operations? And let's see if that's really what the assignment holds. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here. So this video ends here.